I work in a world of human disconnection, in a world where people cannot hide their social isolation, their mental health, or their drug use. Some are homeless, some are housed, and some float between. Most often, they're stigmatized by the outside world. They're told to get off the streets, get a job, or go to jail, as if it were that easy. These people are our sisters, our fathers, our brothers, our coworkers, and our friends. It's all of us. We have high expectations of recovery as a society, but recovery is not a linear journey. Recovery takes people on a wild ride of internal healings, and sometimes it doesn't happen. You can give people all the love in the world, be there to support them in any way they identify, and yet they end up in the world that I work in, the harm reduction world. She's not using drugs, are words I can never forget. I had the best intentions of supporting one of my loved ones when I found out she was addicted to Oxycontin in 2011. Her support network gathered around her, and we held an intervention. We know you're using drugs. This needs to stop because we love you. But guess what? It didn't work. Nor did any of our other attempts at getting her off of drugs, which is one of the defining principles of harm reduction. People are going to do what they're going to do, regardless of what you or I believes is right or wrong. The Alberta Community Council on HIV recognizes harm reduction as a holistic approach that includes safety, agency, and wellness. This is done through the provision of stigma-free policies, practices, programs, and environments. When I say the words harm reduction, the usual words that go through people's minds are supervised consumption services and needles, which generally ignites fear in those that don't understand. However, when I hear those words, I hear community, healing, hope, and connection. How can you enable people to continue to use drugs by providing harm reduction services is a question that I get asked time and again. This belief makes absolutely no sense to me. Supervised consumption services and needle distribution does not cause people to want to use drugs. Much the same as having access to fast food restaurants does not cause heart disease. People are the driving factors of this crisis, and it's becoming more visible, which is intensifying this belief. I lead a harm reduction organization in a northern Albertan community. 7 years ago, our organization handed out 20,000 needles per year. Today, we are handing out approximately 120,000. I can assure you, not a single human has walked through our door and said to me, "Injection drug use is really cool, I'd like to try that." In fact, most people hate it. Most people are so ashamed of their habits that they've become a shadow of themselves, and some no longer care if they live or die. But this is where harm reduction comes in. Harm reduction is a powerful connection tool. Harm reduction connects to that place that's deep inside us that's actually screaming for help. Harm reduction says, "I see you, you're not alone. Let's build a relationship, and I'm here when you need me." Plus, it's an evidence-based intervention to reduce health disparities in communities. Harm reduction was recognized as a public health approach in the 1990s during the AIDS crisis. It was initially believed that only gay or bisexual men could be at risk of the virus. However, as it spread to other populations, we noticed some groups, such as injection drug users, were at higher risk. Back in the day, in communities such as Vancouver, injection drug users were provided needles and education. We still provide the same service today. We teach people one use, one needle per use, everything new every time, and throw away your debris. This approach has proven effective to reduce HIV and hepatitis C rates in community, which are both costly to treat and do a lot of psychological damage to the ones diagnosed. For decades, our organization was considered an AIDS service organization. But as the needs for drug use interventions have intensified, some of us have shifted our mission and vision and now identify as harm reduction organizations. We have been and will continue to be a place where people can go to connect back to themselves and back to a continuum of care. Harm reduction provides access to equitable and low-barrier healthcare services. Not only are we a healthcare service, but we are also expert navigators that can help connect people to financial supports, housing, detox and treatment, and opioid dependency programs. Our organization, for example, has created a wraparound care model, which includes interventions such as social housing, opioid overdose prevention programs, street outreach, maternal health programs, and the list goes on. We have created a wraparound care model to address the determinants of health as we understand that unmet needs can create intensified social disorder. 6 years ago, at my job when I first started as an outreach worker, I used to play crib with people. Today, I'm responding to overdoses in community, collecting needle debris, and strategizing community-based responses to reduce drug-related harms on society. None of the services that my organization provides or any other harm reduction organization provides existed before there was a need. For an example, our community-based organization recently implemented supervised consumption services in the community I worked in. This was an intervention that was created due to a need as the opioid crisis intensified in our community. Fatalities were increasing, overdoses were happening, so we had to implement life-saving programs in order to reduce the costs on society. Harm reduction organizations must be innovative and responsive. We have to adapt to the evolving needs of the community. We are in the trenches and we're often misunderstood because people choose not to understand why we exist or why we are here in community. But it's time to get curious. To do my job, I had to dig deep into my own belief structures, which were deeply rooted in drug abstinence and punishment. I had to understand that the issues that I was seeing in the people we were supporting were socially driven by factors that were often outside of the control of the individual. I had to learn that asking questions and learning about a person was a lot better than telling them what I thought would make their lives better. Once I started asking questions, I was able to paint a picture of why these social issues were happening. I learned at that time that my most powerful tools were listening and asking questions. Asking questions opened a doorway into understanding the drug world I've always been so close to. People started telling me about their pain. I was in the foster care system, and I've been in over 50 different homes. I was sexually abused as a child. My parents got divorced, and I've never gotten over it. As soon as I started understanding the whys, I saw that people were disconnecting from themselves, from their family, and from community. People are disassociating from themselves to cope with the pain that they don't know how to deal with, whatever that pain is for that individual. Harm reduction taught me how to connect with some of the most vulnerable citizens in community. Addiction experts talk about disconnection as being one of the fueling factors for the addiction crisis we are currently seeing in community. I learned early on in my harm reduction career that the tools we were using to connect people, such as needles and naloxone, were simply vehicles for deeper human connection. One individual accessed our services for about a year before he felt safe enough with me to even have a basic conversation. He would come in and ask for the usual. My consistent judgment-free approach eventually showed him that I could be trusted. Eventually, he opened up about his family, the factors that created his trauma, and then he started identifying his needs. Through this connection, we were able to get him housed, he contacted his daughters, and he accessed methadone through an opioid dependency program. We had to create a sense of connection with this individual to address his unique life outcomes as they related to his circumstances. The complexity of the drug-using world I see and you see is continuing to grow. Meth use is on the rise. We have concurrent disorders such as mental health and substance use, which appear more prevalent. Homelessness is increasingly more visible. Harm reduction workers are on the forefront of this. People from every background are now accessing our services, and our demographics have changed rapidly. We are seeing younger and younger people entering this life, and more women. We have tent cities popping up in communities. Our shelters are operating at max capacity. We have overdoses happening in community. We've got needle debris found everywhere. And because of this, we have social disorder. I see several reasons for this. The gap between the rich and poor continues to grow. Resource-based economies continue to fluctuate. Families are breaking up. Polarization separates us, and we have created an instant and disposable society. People are using drugs to cope with aspects of their life they feel they can't manage or they wish to forget. Harm reduction and harm reduction organizations provide a valuable connection point to understand why we are seeing these social issues increase, because we can connect with the individuals living the experience and collect qualitative data. The veil has lifted between those that use drugs and those that do not. There is no clearer picture of this than the opioid crisis, which killed over 746 Albertans alone in 2018, averaging 2 people per day. Raise your hands if you or someone you know has been affected by this crisis. Harm reduction workers are working within this crisis. We're there with you when you find a meth pipe in your child's bedroom. We're there when you call and say, "He overdosed last night. I thought it was a heart attack. Can you train me how to use naloxone?" Not only are harm reduction organizations supporting people living on the streets, but harm reduction organizations are supporting everyone in your community. I believe social change is needed if we want to reduce the current drug crisis impacts we are seeing in community today. I believe we need to create authentic connection in every relationship we can possibly have. Leading a harm reduction organization has taught me how to build powerful community connections so I can strengthen pathways of care and also set up safety nets for people so we can move them along a continuum. Our organization has found that people need to be navigated through this system. It's not simply enough to say detox is over here and the shelter's over there. We have to help people to get to these services so they don't feel alone or isolated. We hear the phrase, "It takes a village to raise a child." Well, it takes that same community-based approach to help that child heal when the village has failed. Connection must not only exist between service users and service providers. Connection must exist through multiple layers of government, community-based organizations, institutions, and citizens alike in order to create social change. I believe we need to work together to create this pathway to recovery that is both intentional and driven by community. Working together helps us create this pathway and helps us create stronger connections in ourselves and for the people we are supporting. We need to reduce our stigma surrounding mental health and substance use. The change starts with us, and it starts today. The merits of harm reduction do not simply lie in the tools we use for connection, but it lies in the approach. Imagine a world where we asked questions and withheld judgment. What if we asked, "Why are you using drugs? Why are you on the streets? What happened to you?" Imagine if we worked in systems that work together for the common good. Imagine if all of us sat back, heard the other speak, and allowed space for authentic connection. I believe this approach can build connections in anybody because it builds connections in those that are disenfranchised. Harm reduction connects, and connection is needed now more than ever. Thank you.